Love Letters to and from Sarah, a memorial tribute from her soulmate by Harris Gulko. My name is Crystal Strang. I am an event facilitator for McNally Robinson Booksellers, and on behalf of the bookstore, it is my privilege and my pleasure to be able to welcome and introduce tonight's guest author. This is a true love story about the author and his soulmate. Harris D. Gulko has written under the pen name David G. Surratt. His friendship with Sarah goes back to 1960. They remained friends over the many years, but were never romantically involved. When Harris returned from an overseas assignment, he and Sarah were both alone. After reacquainting through casual chat, their relationship deepened and developed into not only longtime friends, but soulmates. He and Sarah were soulmates for only 3.5 years. Of that period, he writes, that's 42 months, 1,277.5 days, 30,660 hours. Each day, each hour was for me the most precious of gifts, and I choose to believe Sarah felt the same. After she died, he became aware that she had kept virtually all the emails, letters, phones, and everything he had sent her during their courtship and from when they were finally together. As a tribute to her memory, he reproduced some of that correspondence and included some of his original oil paintings in this lovely memorial book. The net proceeds from the sale of this book will accrue to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Just before we hear from Harris, I am also very pleased to welcome here to say a few words Tara Mangano, who is the PR and Communications Manager for the Friends of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Please join me in welcoming Tara Mangano.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming today. It's great to see a lot of people here in support of Harris and essentially in support of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. I read Love Letters to and from Sarah from cover to cover, and in a moment for me when I needed some light and love in my life. There was a time where my mother was in the hospital and she had been rushed to the hospital, and I had this book in my briefcase, and in those moments where I needed some solace, I opened the book and I read the entire book at the hospital. So your words and the love shared in this book helped me throughout my time. And speaking about human rights is all about love. And the Canadian Museum for Human Rights is all about trying to engage the world in peaceful dialogue and in love as well. And I'm not too sure if you know, but Harris Gulko's proceeds of this book will go to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. We would like to thank Harris for being such a philanthropist and a wonderful donor to the Human Rights Museum. And your gift will go towards building that magnificent building. And today was the first day that we put some glass on the museum. And every day it's starting to come closer to an end, which we are proud to say will most likely be, will be, at the end of 2012. So Harris, thank you very much for sharing your wonderful words with us and with the world. And thank you for donating your proceeds to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Thank you. I'd now like to call upon Harris Gulko, who will share his story. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I'm not unable to speak extemporaneously, but all my professional life, I absolutely insisted that anybody that was going to address a group was going to write its remarks, time them, and make them short and sweet. So I propose to follow my own good advice. Thank you again, Sarah. I did not want to profit from my story about love and loss. So when I started thinking about which charity I should donate the proceeds of the sale of my book to, I decided on the Canadian Friends of Human Rights. Not only because of its merit, but also because it's the first national museum to be located in Winnipeg, just as I chose to be located in Winnipeg. I've lived many lives. Currently, I'm in my 6th reincarnation. book being launched today is the story of my fifth life. But let me first briefly describe my first four lives. I was born in Toronto in 1927. In 1953, at the age of 26, I became the Ontario Executive Director of JNF, Jewish National Fund, the agency that plants trees in Israel. 10 years later, the national directorship of that organization became vacant, and I was invited to move to Montreal and assume that post, and thus began my second life. When my colleagues in Jerusalem saw how the Canadian income really leaped under my professional leadership, they invited me to come to Israel and become the liaison officer between Jerusalem and the United States. Accordingly, in 1979, at the age of 52, I left Canada for Jerusalem and thus embarked on my third rebirth. 5 years later, I was approached by the leadership of the Herzog Hospital in Jerusalem to become its international director for public relations and fundraising. And accepting this challenging post, I began my fourth life. After 28 years in Israel, I felt the pull of returning to family and to Canada. Shortly after returning to Canada in 2006, I contacted a lady whom I had first met in 1960. Contacting her was the beginning of my fifth. In my book, I refer to her as Sarah. Actually, she was Rebecca Crystal, who was born, bred, and died in Winnipeg. We had kept in touch over the many years, but there had never been any romantic element in our relationship. Upon my return to Canada 5 years ago, I contacted her, just as I had periodically for decades. But now it was different. She and I were each alone. Between phone calls, emails, and visits, we simply fell in love. We both knew what love was, perhaps more important, and what love was not. For 6 months, we were in constant contact by periodic visits, emails, and when it came to phone calls, we were like a couple of besotted teenagers. Our relationship was so special, I could not find an existing word to describe it, so I proceeded to coin one: coupleness. A state of coupleness is attained when each feels that her or his number one priority is the needs and wishes of the other. After several visits with her, we seriously discussed starting living together. When she fell and broke her hip, on the very day of my arrival to visit her in Palm Springs, there was no way I was going to leave her, ever. We returned to her home. She had lived half a year here in Winnipeg and the other half in Palm Springs. Thus, my fifth reincarnation began and lasted 3.5 years. After she died, I became aware that she had kept virtually all the email messages, letters, poems, cards, etc. that I had sent her, both during our courtship and whilst we were living together. As a tribute to her memory, I wrote this book with some of the correspondence between us and included some of my original oil paintings. It constitutes a record of my fifth very short life. Let me now read a few passages from it. Sarah inspired me to try my hand at poetry. Never before had I ever put rhyme to rhyme. Here is one of my first poems. Epiphany at midnight. Life is made of time. Love is made of time. Privileged are those who find love in time. Wise are those who express that love before life runs out of time. She reacted to this poem by writing, "You have told me that you love me, but please tell me again and again. I can never hear it enough. You are in my thoughts, in my heart constantly. You are everything I want and need, more. My love for you knows no end." Before we started living together and in anticipation of spending some 10 days with her, I wrote, When we have those few days together, there will be days of talking and telling, days and nights of saying things that can only be said face to face. Just now words spring to my mind that I selfishly save for I can have the pleasure of looking at you as I give expression to them and to see the light in your eyes as well as the sound of your voice. In reply to one of my emails, she wrote, "You are absolutely making love to me every day with your voice and with your words. Today I was so weak with longing and love for you after reading your emails. When at last we meet, can you even imagine how much love I have to give you? You make me so happy. I love you with all my heart." We spent hours and hours on the phone each day. When we fell in love, we marveled at the fact that between us we were 163 years. We frankly discussed whether at our age and stage of life we could have a successful, intimate relationship. After discussing this one day, I wrote her, "You said you did not have an angina attack ever since we fell in love. How exciting, how thrilling, how soul satisfying. Please God, it will continue." I recall a lecture from a former hospital director. His research demonstrated most definitely that older people who have an active sex life actually live longer. He then added with a smile that from personal experience, he was a living witness to the accuracy of the statistics. I was questioning myself if I would be a party to damaging your health, God forbid, by our making love. Because of what you said about the absence of angina attacks, I honestly feel that when time comes, it will be the culmination of two old-time friends becoming lovers. Her email next day read, "Today your messages made me so happy, but a little sad too. Each day I find you more, but some days, like today, I feel a deep sadness because I cannot be with you." Another one from me to her. "I delight in expressing my love in words, perhaps too many words. But you have this marvelous gift of expressing your love in bite-sized bits and pieces, small and exquisite, like precious jewels. These quick, right from the heart expressions delight my soul. What wonderful words you choose to express your love. If I spent a lifetime searching for love poems, I would never find anything as powerful, as all-consuming as these 6 words of yours. Loving you makes my life worthwhile." Now, after Sarah's death, it's hard to realize that she was over 80 years old when, in her passion, she wrote such emails as, "Your email last night almost brought me to tears. I cannot get enough of you. You are truly the love of my life. Have you any idea how much I love you? The thought of being with you and near you is delicious. It is wonderful to be in love with you. You fill my heart with love. The love you give me is like nothing I have ever known. You are my lover, my confidant, my poet, my builder of castles, my very best friend. I am so in love with you. I know I will love you." In response, I wrote her, "My God, woman, I am madly in love with you. Thoughts of you fill my days. I treasure every word and often go back to read and reread them like a miser counting his gold. Since I cannot open my windows and shout, 'I am in love with Zara,' I will whisper, here in the privacy of my room, 'I am in love with Zara,' quietly, but in the deepest part." Here is another email from her. "Again, I want to tell you that you are the love of my life. I cannot imagine my life without you. Morning and evening, you touch my heart with most wonderful words of endearment. You make me feel loved. You make me feel beautiful. I can't wait to hear your voice. You are more real and present to me than anything in this world. Love me forever, as I will love you. In another email she wrote, I love you, you are my everything. I never lose the wonder of my love for you. I've never felt so alive and happy. The intense emotional love we share fills my heart with happiness. You are so loved. My sweetheart, your email today touched my heart. What a love you bring to me. As the time of your arrival gets closer, I don't know how I will be able to get through the next few weeks. My love for you is so intense. I want to tell you again and again that I want you to love me beyond words. I love you more today than I did yesterday, and yesterday I loved you more than words can say. I cannot imagine my life without you. All the previous excerpts were from before we started living together. The following I wrote after we moved in together. When we made pancakes together, or washed dishes, or similar domestic tasks, we enjoy the closeness and warmth of working together. I suggest these chores are sublimation for the dancing that age and infirmity denies us. On the anniversary of her death, I wrote, 4 years ago, Sarah became my lover. What a world together we began to discover. For 3.5 we enjoyed boundless bliss. What a joy accompanied every kiss. What a special day was January 16. That was the day she became my queen. Chatelaine of our home, and quite ethereal, regal she was, indeed imperial. All week I was miserable, recalling her dying, sad and depressed. I became weary of crying. So I fought mightily against being sad, deciding rather to rejoice in what I had. This is the first poem I've written since she passed away. Perhaps it will help me the dragon loneliness to slay. Bury your dead, the sages said, and restrict your grieving, and thank God for all the blessings you have been receiving. Live by my rules, we are commanded. This I must obey, or else I'll be stranded. Choose rather life, we are told. I pray that much good in my life will yet unfold. Sarah's death pushes me on to a new road. Where will it lead? Questions about me or my book, I'm going to try to answer.
A pretty intense relationship with her. And I guess over the course of that relationship, you probably discussed this question. Is this a woman you think you would have had a relationship with that intensity when you were 25?
A good question. Did everybody hear Jerry's question? Yes, we did discuss it. And it was, I think we came to the conclusion that one of the reasons we had a good life together, good life and love together, was because we knew what not good was. My late father used to say, you can't appreciate the taste of sugar if you've never tasted salt. So I think what we had was based on many, many years of experience, not only with our respective spouses, but with life in general. We were each able to decide what's important. Let me give you an example. 2 days after I moved in with her, I said, sweetheart, what's the zip code? And she told me whatever. The last 3 digits she said was OR3. And I put into the computer wouldn't take no. I realized it was a 0. So I put in a 0. I said to her, you know, sweetheart, it's not a no, it's a 0. So she said, I've lived there 30 years, you're telling me what my zip code is? I said, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. You're right. Day later, she, very unusually, went to use the computer and realized it was indeed a 0. She came and stood like this. She said, you bloody liar, you knew you were right, and you said in all sincerity that you're wrong, you apologize. I said, what's more important, sweetheart, the bloody zip code or our love? Now, in my previous experience, you're looking for brownie points to win, unfortunately. So one learns short, long answer to a short question, but typical.
From maturity after the age,
Quite.
to the maturity that you have.
Yes, yes.
And it's not the same as when you're a teenager or married.
I think the trick also, there's a tendency, I've been told that people that came out of the Holocaust, or survived the Holocaust, either brought to their new life all the best that they had in them, thanking God every day that they didn't die, or the worst surfaced. And they spent the rest of their life being miserable and regretting their past life. So I guess the trick is to take from our experience what we can learn and not to be bitter, to try to do the best we can. Knowing, what did that guy, the president of Coca-Cola, say? The past is history, the future is a mystery. Today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. Very thoughtful, very meaningful. I was very pleased that the first 3 gentlemen who came and asked me to autograph the book asked me specifically to address it to them and their wife. It's beautiful. Beautiful. I'm a great believer in love. Yes, sir.
How did you reacquaint yourself?
How did I?
I look out, you've been apart for 45 years, and then who took the initiative? You contacted her?
I had been phoning Rebecca periodically over all these years since we first met. And when I became the national director of the Herzog Hospital, I had occasion to come to Winnipeg in the course of traveling the country. I would stay with her and her husband, and we were good friends socially. As I said, she came on a trip to Israel that I had organized in 1960, and we just seemed to be friends over the years. So when I phoned her from Montreal when I first came back, it was nothing unusual. I phoned her from time to time over the years. She wasn't the only old-time friend that I phoned trying to become reacquainted and reestablish my life in Canada. But you know, I always suspected that there's no such thing as a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence that Rebecca and I stayed in touch since 1960. God had us in mind, and he believes in long-range planning. We started phoning each other, and at first the phone calls were very casual, very, very nothing. And one day I said to her, You know, Rebecca, I don't think we want to talk about how to clean lettuce and how much to pay a cleaning lady and that sort of thing, which we've talked about. She said, yeah, what do you think we want to talk about? I said, us. I want you to know that my first job was selling peanuts in the park when I was 11 years old. I want to know what your first job was. I want to know everything about you. And I want you to know everything about me. So we started doing just that. And the more we talked, the closer we became. So, yes.
So what was your first job?
Sorry?
What was your first job?
What was my first
Very first job.
It was the best business proposition. I never had one even to compare to it. I remember it distinctly. I bought a pound of peanuts for 10 cents, put them into 5 individual packages, sold each for 5 cents. My 10 cents brought me in 25 cents. I've never done such a good deal in my life.
Was it her? That is great.
She sold ladies' dresses. And she mentioned the name of the man. His name escapes me, but you Winnipeggers would remember him if I could recall his name. He was looking for somebody, and when she went for an interview, he said, well, you don't have any experience. She said, well, how can I get experience if nobody will hire me? She says, I'll work, I'll do my darndest. I'll sell whatever you want me to sell, and you'll see I'm going to be a good sales lady. And she was. And it wasn't that much later that she was in charge of the fashion department of the family business that the Crystals eventually started. Yes?
Yeah, when did Sarah pass away?
When?
Yeah, what year?
Last year. I read, when her daughter-in-law came in for the funeral, she was a good politician. She gathered all these many letters and cards and so on. And on the day they left back for Palm Springs, put this bunch of papers in front of me and left. And I read them over, and I cried, and I laughed, and I smiled, and I laughed. And as I was sitting there, by chance, in that chair, I was immediately opposite a couple of paintings that Rebecca particularly liked. And I got this vision of a book with the text on one side and a reproduction of one of my paintings on the other. That's how it was. Actually, my original intention was to have one book for myself. But after I had that one book printed, the lady from the print shop phoned me and she said, Mr. Gulko, the first time I read your manuscript, I read it as a proofreader. But the second and third and fourth and maybe sixth time I read it, she said, I read it as a woman peeking into a secret diary. Why don't you publish it? My first reaction, it's too personal, it's too intimate. But then I thought, if I take out the more personal and more intimate parts, and some of my daughters think I didn't take out enough of those parts, but if women, they're in their late 40s, early 50s, if they can't understand that their old father still has some passion left, then they have a problem, not I. So I took out those more intimate parts and I published them.
Since you brought up the subject, I was thinking to ask you how your daughter was going.
Well, it's exactly like they reacted to my beard. 4-1 are improving. 4 in favor, 1 against. Not bad, yeah. I was surprised, actually. I find it difficult to understand that with so many cases today of adult children being in the middle of the sandwich generation, worrying about children, worrying about aged parents, it would seem to me that my daughters should be very happy that I'm not a burdensome old crank yet. Who knows what the future brings. Yes, ma'am. Do I feel Sarah's presence? Sarah lived, loved, and died. Actually, I recall the exact moment that I was able to accept that fact. When I got the draft copy of this book from the publisher, I ran to where Rebecca usually would sit, wanting to share with her and show it to her. Then, of course, I realized she was dead. I said, I think he said it out loud, Sarah wasn't there, this book wouldn't be here. Today, Harris, I said, is the first day of the rest of your life. And that's it. She's dead. I have fond memories. I have wonderful memories of my father, mother. I don't know how one would want to live with the past. Some people do. Present is a gift. I don't know if that answers you. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. I know some of you postponed the lesson in the synagogue to be here. I'm very pleased and very grateful. A brand new experience for me. And with the help of God, there are more new experiences. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah.
I just wanted also to say thank you to all of you for coming and making this such a special event, and thank you to Harris for both having the courage to publish it. I think that was an excellent suggestion and a wonderful decision to make. It is a very beautiful tribute. So thank you very much for coming out tonight and sharing that with us. And please stay now. We will keep him here, of course. And if you haven't done so already, come up and you can talk to him one-on-one and get a copy of your book signed and help yourself to tea and coffee. And then we just ask that you, of course, pay for it on your way out at the main cash. So thank you again. Thank you, Harold. Wonderful night.